you started. Hello, my name is Sevarns, and today I'll be giving you a presentation on the seriated Playfair cipher. Background on the cipher: it begins with the seriated Playfair cipher is a form of Playfair cipher, which was the first cryptology method that incorporated two-letter coding and decoding instead of one. So an effect of this was that it developed into a cipher that was harder to break due to it not being like a single substitution method. It involves a five-letter square, Playfair square, which has, you can use a keyword, and it leaves out the letter J. And it's very rarely used anymore due to the fact that computers have evolved into where they can decode this instantaneously almost. This will be the 5x5 square that I'll be using for this presentation. The keyword would be Playfair. So what you do with the square to set it up, you take your keyword, take out any word or letters that are used more than once, and you then write that along the top, and going horizontally down, you fill in the rest of the alphabet that was not used in your keyword. Rules for the regular Playfair coding. If it's two letters are in the same column of this 5x5 square, then you take the letters below them, directly beneath them, starting with the first letter of the two letters. And if they're in the same row, you take the ones to the right. And if they form a rectangle, what you'll do is you take the ones in the same row, starting with the first letter that on the corners of the rectangle. And here's some examples of these. For the same column, RC, as you can see, they're in the same column going up and down. So what you would do to code would be you would take, since it starts with R, you would go down one from that, which is C, and then the C, you go down one from that, which is N. So then other examples, XQ would convert to GW, FZ to MF, and then for decoding, obviously it's the inverse, you would go up one. So for RC, it would end up being LR, and so on. For same row, you go to the right. So RE would code into EX, as you take the R first because it's the first letter of your two-letter grouping. You go to the right, which is E, and then the E turns into an X. And then for decoding, this is obviously the inverse as well. So an RE would turn into an IR. And then for the rectangle coding, but what I mean by that is, say you have PD, you can see that they form like a square rectangle shape with the AB. So you take whatever one's first and you go in the same row, which is A, and then to D it would be B, so that would be how you code for that. And then the inverse would be for PD, it would be AB. Or AB would be PD, I mean. The only difference with the seriated Playfair, you take the regular Playfair cipher and how all of the decoding and everything is the same. The only difference is the setup of how you get your two-letter groupings. In the seriated Playfair, you have like a predetermined group of letters that you would take, and what you do is that's how you like set up your words. So for this one, for an example, in plain text, if your plain text is Cryptology, involves coding and decoding. In this one, I use six-letter groupings as my predetermined number of letters that you would take. So as you can see, Cryptology, we split that after the whole thing we split after every 6 letters, and you move one below the other. So it reads Cryptology, crypto, and then you move it down, and then that's the rest of Cryptology, and then it begins into involves, and then you just go down, up, down, up, down, up until you have your whole thing laid out for you. And if you find any repeats going in a vertical manner, such as I had 2 O's that came about in the second grouping there with part of involves and coding, So if you run into this issue, you have to put an X in there, just to, because you can't code with two letters if it's the same letter, because you wouldn't have any of the rules that would be followed by that. So an example of a coding, I used the same 5x5 square with Playfair as my keyword, and then my plain text was cryptology involves coding and decoding. So what you would do here, you take CL, because this is your 6-letter grouping, you split it up as I did, and then you take CL, and as you see, CL is in the same column. So you begin by going down because you were decoding. So it's the inverse of coding, and so you go down N, and then from the L, R, and then so on, you go EN. EN is a rectangle, so you go RO, or the RO converts to EN in the ciphertext. The YG is in the same column, so that turns into XQ as you go down with that one again. PY is in the same row, so with that one you go to the right with this LF, and so on with this one, and eventually, and then after you get it all decoded, or all coded, then you peel off the 5-letter groupings. You peel it off into 5-letter groupings, but like a common mistake you can make is by going left to right, which is incorrect. You take your first 6-letter grouping and then go right beneath it, and then you go to the, so it'd be the NEX LPQ, and then you go to the RNQFBO, which is found right beneath it, and then you would hop back up to the top and repeat that again. And then for decoding, I use the same example again just to make it simple to understand. I took my ciphertext that I found in the last one and then went through and decoded it this time, which is just the inverse of how I coded it. So the NR is in the same column, so that translates to CL. As NR, you would go up instead of down. So the N turns into a C and the R turns into an L. The RO, that's in the, or the EN I mean, is the rectangle, and you decode that by taking, because the E is the first letter, so you go RO, and so on, and then once again, you have to make sure to follow the rules by taking the first 6-letter grouping, going right underneath it, putting that out. So as you can see, it goes cryptology, involves coding and decoding after. And you remove the X's after decoding or coding, because that obviously wasn't part of your plain cipher or plain text. Any questions?